Go to lunch in the Jewish community. I won't tell on the bros for the immunity. Paying feed them, that shit ain't gon' ruin me. I'm the only one now let outdo me.
My grandfather lived through the Great Depression. He watched wealthy people lose everything overnight. He saw businesses collapse, banks fail, and families destroyed by economic forces they didn't understand and hadn't prepared for. That experience shaped everything he taught me about economic cycles and preparation. Now, in 2025, I'm seeing warning signs that remind me of his stories. Porsche's profit fell 98%. Their China sales dropped 26%. Tesla's deliveries declined for the first time ever, down nearly 9% year over year. Luxury retail is contracting. LVMH reported its first revenue decline in years. Commercial real estate vacancies are at multi-decade highs, with major cities seeing office vacancy rates above 20%. Credit card delinquencies are rising to levels not seen since 2010. Consumer savings rates have collapsed from pandemic highs of 30% down to just 3%. The yield curve inverted and stayed inverted longer than any time since the 1970s, historically a near-perfect recession predictor. Major retailers are reporting inventory buildups as consumer spending slows. Nike's revenue fell, with management citing weakening consumer demand. Home Depot's same-store sales declined. Even dollar stores are struggling as their core customers face economic pressure. Trucking companies are reporting freight volume declines. Rail car loads are down. These aren't opinion, they're hard data showing economic deceleration. The housing market is frozen. Existing home sales at 30-year lows. New construction permits declining. Prices sticky, but transaction volumes collapsed because nobody wants to sell their 3% mortgage and buy with a 7% mortgage. This creates economic paralysis. Corporate earnings warnings are increasing. Mass layoffs in tech, finance, media. Companies that were hiring aggressively 2 years ago are now cutting 10, 20, 30% of staff. Unemployment is still officially low, but that's a lagging indicator. By the time unemployment rises significantly, the recession is well underway. These aren't just statistics, they're warnings. The economy is telling us something, and most people aren't listening. They're continuing to spend, take on debt, make risky investments, and assume the good times will last forever. My family has seen this pattern before. We know what comes next, and we know how to prepare. What I'm sharing isn't about predicting exact timing. Nobody can do that. It's about recognizing patterns, understanding what recessions do to different types of people, and positioning yourself to survive and even profit when others are panicking. Recessions reveal who's been swimming naked, as Warren Buffett says. When the tide goes out, you see who was over-leveraged, who was depending on continued expansion, who had no reserves. These people get destroyed. But recessions also reveal who prepared, who has cash, who has sustainable cash flow, who reduced debt, who positioned conservatively. These people not only survive, but acquire assets at generational discounts. The wealthy families in my community who survived multiple recessions all share common characteristics. They maintained liquidity, they avoided excessive leverage, they had diversified income, they lived below their means, they thought in decades, not quarters. The families that disappeared after each recession also shared characteristics. They were fully invested with no cash, they were maximally leveraged. They depended on one or two income sources. They spent everything they made. They optimized for the current environment rather than building resilience. The first thing my grandfather taught me about recessions is that they're inevitable and cyclical. The economy expands, overheats, contracts, and recovers. This has happened throughout history and will continue happening. Fighting this reality is foolish. Preparing for it is wise. Most people treat recessions like unpredictable natural disasters. My family treats them like winter. You know it's coming. You prepare accordingly. And if you're smart, you can even benefit from it while others suffer. When Porsche's profits fall 98%, that's not just about one luxury car company. It's a signal about wealth concentration and consumer confidence at the high end. When the wealthy stop buying luxury goods, it means they're seeing something concerning. They have better information, better advisors, and more to lose. They're pulling back for a reason. When China sales drop 26% for major brands, it signals global demand destruction. China has been the growth engine for luxury goods, real estate, and manufacturing for decades. When that engine sputters, global ripple effects follow. When credit card delinquencies rise while savings rates fall, it means consumers are tapped out. They're borrowing to maintain lifestyles they can't afford. This is unsustainable and eventually collapses. My grandfather would look at these indicators and say the party's ending, time to prepare. So how does my family prepare? What specific actions do we take when we see these warning signs? The first principle is liquidity. During recessions, cash is king. Assets become illiquid. Credit dries up. Opportunities appear but require immediate capital. People who are over-leveraged and illiquid get destroyed. People with cash reserves survive and profit. Right now, my family's building cash reserves aggressively. We're selling non-essential assets. We're reducing spending. We're avoiding new commitments that tie up capital. Every dollar we can convert to liquid cash, we're doing it. This goes against every instinct during good times. When markets are rising, holding cash feels stupid. You're missing out on gains. Everyone else is making money. Your cash is earning minimal interest while stocks and real estate appreciate. But my grandfather taught me that the goal isn't maximizing returns during the boom. The goal is surviving the bust and having capital available when assets go on sale. The people who make fortunes during recessions are those who have cash when everyone else is desperate. In 2008, my uncle had substantial cash reserves while others were over-leveraged. When real estate crashed, he bought properties at 40 cents on the dollar from desperate sellers. Those properties have generated millions in profit and cash flow over the subsequent 15 years. That's only possible if you have cash available when others don't. So right now, we're building cash. How much? My grandfather's rule was 6 months of expenses minimum, preferably 12 to 24 months. And this isn't just household expenses, it's total obligations, including business expenses, property expenses, debt service, everything. For a family with modest means, this might be $30,000 to $50,000. For someone with properties and businesses, it might be several $100,000 or more. The amount matters less than the principle, enough to weather a prolonged income disruption without forced selling. We're building this cash by selling appreciated assets while markets are still strong. That stock position that's up 150%, selling half and taking profits. That rental property in an inflated market. If it's not cash flowing well, selling now rather than hoping for more appreciation. We're also reducing spending and banking the difference, cutting that discretionary 20% of spending and moving it to cash reserves. Every dollar not spent is a dollar in the war chest. Some people object to holding cash because inflation erodes its value. True, but this misses the point. The cash isn't for wealth building, it's for survival and opportunity. You accept the inflation cost as insurance against being forced to sell assets at the worst possible time. This cash reserve serves multiple purposes. It lets you weather income disruptions without panic. It prevents forced selling of assets at the worst time. It positions you to buy when others are selling in desperation. And psychologically, it lets you think clearly when everyone else is panicking. The second principle is debt reduction. Debt is leverage, and leverage works both ways. During expansions, debt amplifies gains. During contractions, debt amplifies losses and can destroy you. Right now, my family is paying down variable rate debt and avoiding new debt, except for specific strategic purposes. We're refinancing variable loans to fixed rates where possible. We're eliminating unnecessary leverage. This doesn't mean becoming debt-free. Remember my earlier writing about using leverage for real estate? That strategy still works, but it requires the right kind of debt. Fixed rate, long-term debt on cash-flowing assets is fine, even good. Variable rate debt, short-term debt, or debt on non-income producing assets is dangerous heading into a recession. The difference is crucial. If you have fixed-rate mortgages on rental properties that cash flow even in a downturn, that debt is manageable. You can weather it. If you have variable rate loans, margin debt, or personal debt funding, consumption, you're exposed to catastrophic risk. We're also stress testing all our debt. Can we service it if income drops 30%, 50%? If the answer is no, we're reducing that debt now while we have the option. Better to reduce leverage voluntarily during good times than be forced to during bad times. The third principle is income diversification. Relying on a single income source is dangerous in any environment, but especially heading into a recession. My family has always maintained multiple income streams: rental properties, businesses, investments, professional income. If one stream dries up during a recession, others continue. This diversification has saved us multiple times. Right now, we're evaluating each income stream for recession resistance. Which sources are most vulnerable? Which are most stable? We're reinforcing stable sources and reducing dependence on vulnerable ones. For example, luxury businesses are highly cyclical. If your income depends on people buying expensive discretionary items, you're exposed. Essential services, basic necessities, and discount offerings tend to be more recession-resistant. We're also looking at geographic and industry diversification. If all your income comes from one industry or one region, you're concentrated risk. Spreading across industries and geographies reduces vulnerability. The fourth principle is cost reduction. During good times, expenses creep up, lifestyle inflation happens naturally. Subscriptions accumulate, spending becomes careless. Heading into a recession, this has to reverse. My family is conducting what my grandfather called expense audits. We're examining every recurring expense and asking, is this necessary? Can we eliminate it? Can we reduce it? Can we renegotiate it? This isn't about becoming miserable or eliminating all enjoyment. It's about distinguishing between essential and discretionary and reducing discretionary spending before we're forced to. Cut the discretionary expenses now and you maintain control. Wait until recession hits and you're cutting desperately from a position of weakness. We're also renegotiating contracts and commitments, leases, service agreements, subscriptions. Everything is being reviewed and either cancelled, reduced, or renegotiated to lower fixed costs. The goal is to lower our burn rate, the amount we need every month to maintain operations. Lower burn rate means we can weather longer downturns with the same cash reserves. The fifth principle is asset quality evaluation. Not all assets are equal during recessions. Some hold value well, others collapse. My grandfather taught me to categorize assets as recession-resistant, recession-vulnerable, or recession-proof. Right now, we're shifting from vulnerable to resistant or proof categories: recession-resistant assets, essential real estate, housing, basic retail, industrial, quality dividend-paying stocks, government bonds, precious metals, businesses providing essential services, recession-vulnerable assets, luxury real estate, retail real estate, speculative stocks, cryptocurrency, businesses dependent on discretionary spending, commercial real estate in declining areas. Recession-proof is perhaps too strong a term, but certain assets come close: cash, short-term government bonds, gold, essential food, and supplies. We're not selling everything vulnerable and going all in on proof, but we're reducing exposure to vulnerable categories and increasing exposure to resistant and proof categories. For example, my uncle owned several luxury retail properties. Great cash flow during good times, but highly vulnerable to recession. He's been quietly selling these over the past year and rotating into essential retail and industrial properties. Lower returns during expansion, but much more stability during contraction. The sixth principle is skill development. Your ability to create value and generate income is your most important asset. During recessions, this becomes even more critical. Right now, my family is investing in skills that remain valuable during downturns. We're learning businesses that thrive during recessions: distressed asset acquisition, property management, accounting, legal services, essential trades. We're also maintaining and strengthening professional networks. During recessions, opportunities come through relationships. The person with a strong network hears about opportunities before others, gets access to deals, and finds employment or contracts when others struggle. My grandfather would spend the year or two before a recession deepening relationships with people who controlled capital, had recession-resistant businesses, or had specialized knowledge. When the recession hit, these relationships created opportunities. The seventh principle is strategic positioning for opportunities. Recessions destroy some people but create fortunes for others. The difference is preparation. Right now, while building cash reserves and reducing risk, we're also identifying potential opportunities. What assets will likely become available at deep discounts? Who will be forced to sell? What businesses will fail, creating acquisition opportunities? We're making lists, doing research, building relationships with potential sellers before they're desperate. When the recession hits and they need to sell, we'll be positioned to act immediately. We're identifying over-leveraged property owners who will face refinancing problems. Companies with good products but weak balance sheets that might need capital. Businesses in recession-resistant industries whose owners might panic and sell cheap. We're also building relationships with bankruptcy attorneys, distressed debt investors, and workout specialists. These people see opportunities first and can direct them to prepared buyers. This might sound predatory, but it's not. We're not creating the distress. Economic cycles do that. We're preparing to provide liquidity when others need it desperately. We pay fair prices for distressed assets and often help sellers avoid worse outcomes. My grandfather would say, "Recessions transfer wealth from the unprepared to the prepared. You can be on either side of that transfer. I choose to be prepared." In 2008, my uncle bought several properties from people facing foreclosure. He paid enough that they avoided foreclosure and credit destruction, but well below peak prices. Everyone benefited. Sellers avoided foreclosure, he got good deals, banks got performing loans instead of foreclosures. The eighth principle is family and community preparation. Recessions affect everyone. Family members might lose jobs, face financial stress, or need help. Community members struggle. The 10th principle is psychological preparation. This might be the most important and least discussed. Recessions are psychologically brutal. Watching asset values decline is painful. Seeing others panic is contagious. The temptation to make emotional decisions is enormous. My grandfather taught me that psychological preparation prevents catastrophic mistakes. Most wealth destruction during recessions happens not from the recession itself, but from panicked reactions to it. People sell assets at the bottom because they can't stand watching values decline. They abandon strategies that would work if maintained. They make desperate moves that lock in losses. My family prepares psychologically by studying previous recessions, understanding the emotional cycle, and committing to strategies before panic sets in. We remind ourselves that recessions are temporary. Assets that decline in value will recover if they're fundamentally sound. Cash flow matters more than mark-to-market values. Panic creates opportunities for the prepared. We also prepare by accepting that paper losses will occur. If you own stocks or real estate, values will decline. This is normal and temporary. The question isn't whether you'll see paper losses, but whether you'll panic and convert them to real losses by selling. Let me address some specific recession scenarios and how my family would respond. Scenario 1, widespread job losses. If unemployment rises significantly, rental income might decline due to tenant job losses. Business income might decline due to reduced consumer spending. Investment income might decline due to dividend cuts. Our preparation: substantial cash reserves to weather income disruptions, recession-resistant income streams, properties affordable to employed renters, not just affluent renters, businesses providing essential services, dividend stocks with long histories of maintaining payouts during recessions. Scenario 2. Credit crunch. Banks stop lending, credit becomes scarce and expensive, refinancing becomes difficult or impossible. Our preparation: fixed-rate long-term debt locked in before the crunch, minimal reliance on credit for operations, cash reserves that eliminate need for short-term borrowing, relationships with multiple lenders built during good times. Scenario 3. Asset price collapse. Real estate, stocks and other assets decline 30 to 50% or more. Our preparation: strong enough cash flow that we don't need to sell assets at depressed prices, cash reserves to buy assets from desperate sellers, psychological preparation to avoid panic selling, focus on cash flow rather than mark-to-market values. Scenario 4. Deflationary spiral. Prices decline, spending contracts, economy enters prolonged recession. Our preparation: cash becomes more valuable in deflation, so substantial cash reserves benefit us. Fixed-rate debt becomes more burdensome, but we've stress-tested our ability to service it. Businesses providing essential services remain viable even as luxury spending collapses. Scenario 5. Currency crisis or high inflation. Government prints money to fight recession, currency devalues, inflation rises. Our preparation: hard assets like real estate and commodities, precious metals allocation, fixed-rate debt that becomes easier to service with inflated currency, businesses that can pass costs to customers. Notice that some scenarios conflict: deflation versus inflation, for example. We can't perfectly prepare for all scenarios, but we can position for resilience across multiple scenarios through diversification and conservative leverage. Now let me share what my family is specifically doing right now in 2025 as we see these warning signs. We've reduced our stock market exposure by about 30%, moving that capital to cash and short-term government bonds. We're keeping long-term positions in quality dividend-paying companies, but trimming speculative positions entirely. We've sold 2 commercial properties that were highly dependent on consumer discretionary spending. We're using that capital to buy essential retail and industrial properties with long-term leases to credit-worthy tenants. We've built cash reserves to 18 months of total obligations across all family businesses and properties. This is higher than the usual 6 to 12 months because the warning signs are serious. We've locked in fixed-rate financing on all properties where we had variable-rate debt. We paid slightly higher rates to eliminate rate risk. We've cut discretionary business expenses by about 25%, travel, entertainment, non-essential services, luxury office space. We're maintaining revenue-generating expenses but eliminating comfort and status expenses. We've had family meetings to discuss mutual support plans. Who might be vulnerable? What help might be needed? What commitments are we making? We've identified specific opportunities we'll pursue when prices drop, certain property types in certain areas, specific businesses that are currently overvalued but have strong fundamentals, distressed debt we might acquire. We've strengthened relationships with lenders, investors, and potential partners. We're making sure we're top of mind when opportunities emerge. We've increased precious metals allocation modestly, not as a speculation, but as insurance against currency or system risks. This doesn't mean we're paralyzed or completely defensive. We're still operating businesses, maintaining properties, making strategic investments, but we're doing it with much more caution and much more liquidity than during obvious expansion periods. The goal isn't to perfectly time the recession or avoid all losses. The goal is to be positioned to survive it without catastrophic damage and to have resources available to capitalize on opportunities it creates. Let me share what happened to people in my community during previous recessions to illustrate the difference between prepared and unprepared. In 2008, one family in our community had built substantial wealth through real estate development. Dozens of properties, all heavily leveraged, all dependent on continued appreciation and easy refinancing. When the crash came, they couldn't refinance, couldn't sell, couldn't service debt. Within 18 months, they lost everything. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, financial ruin. I watched the family patriarch, a man in his 60s who'd built an empire over 40 years, lose it all because he was optimized for expansion rather than positioned for resilience. Another family had similar real estate holdings, but with more conservative leverage, substantial cash reserves, and diversified income streams. They had paper losses like everyone, but they could service their debt, didn't need to sell, and eventually recovered. They also bought properties from desperate sellers at deep discounts. They emerged from the recession wealthier than they entered it. The difference wasn't intelligence or hard work. Both families worked hard and were smart. The difference was preparation and conservative financial positioning. One family asked, "How much can I make?" The other asked, "How much can I afford to lose?" In expansions, the first question leads to higher returns. In contractions, the second question leads to survival. I also watched what happened to individuals during that recession. Professionals making $300,000 per year who'd spent every dollar on lifestyle found themselves suddenly unemployed with no savings and crushing fixed expenses. They went from appearing wealthy to broke within months. Meanwhile, modest income families who'd saved aggressively weathered multi-year unemployment without catastrophic distress. The lesson was clear: income doesn't equal security. Assets and reserves equal security. The person making $100,000 with $50,000 in savings is more secure than the person making $300,000 with nothing saved and high fixed expenses. The overleveraged family was optimized for continued expansion. The conservative family was positioned for resilience. When expansion ended, optimization became catastrophic. Resilience became the winning strategy. This pattern repeats every recession. The aggressive, optimized players get destroyed. The conservative, resilient players survive and often profit. My family chooses resilience over optimization every time. We give up some upside during booms to ensure survival during busts. Over multiple cycles, this approach builds far more wealth than trying to maximize returns during each expansion. I'll close with the most important lesson my grandfather taught me about recessions. They're not random disasters to fear. They're predictable cycles to prepare for and profit from. The economy expands and contracts. This is normal. Fighting this reality or pretending it won't happen is foolish. Accepting it and preparing for it is wise. Most people extend themselves during expansions, assuming good times will last forever. They take on maximum debt, reduce savings, increase spending, make aggressive investments. When recession hits, they're exposed and vulnerable. My family does the opposite. During expansions, we build reserves, reduce leverage, increase savings, make conservative investments. When recession hits, we're positioned to survive and acquire assets from the over-leveraged. This isn't sexy or exciting. It means lower returns during booms. It means watching others make money faster than us. It means being called overly conservative or missing out. But it also means survival. It means being able to sleep at night when others panic. It means having cash when others are desperate. It means building wealth that lasts across generations rather than boom and bust cycles. Right now, the signs are clear. Porsche's profits collapsed, China sales declining, credit stress rising, asset prices disconnected from fundamentals, consumers tapped out. The expansion is late stage and vulnerable. This doesn't mean recession starts tomorrow. It might be months or even a year or two away. But the direction is clear and the time to prepare is now while you still have options. Build cash reserves, reduce debt, cut expenses, improve income streams, shift to recession-resistant assets, develop valuable skills, strengthen networks, prepare psychologically, position for opportunities. The choice is always yours.